So Darja, she has been into this business for some time, and I would say you are a thought leader, is a quite good sort of in digitalization. And right now you try also to help the Prime Minister in the innovation policies and what we should do to keep up our sort of position. So it's a challenge, but it's one of 4 persons doing that. So I will give the word to you now, and I'm really looking forward to listen to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, and I'm honored and, to be honest, completely humbled to be here. It feels amazing because I know that there are so many brilliant people in this room. So the reason why I'm super happy to be here is that I'm looking forward so much to everything that I can learn if I get a chance. Apparently, to get that chance, I'm supposed to say a few words first, which is a bit scary, but I'll get to it. And I was asked to also talk on the topic of digitalization for sustainability, which I happen to think is a very interesting thing to discuss. Because we know what we need to do, and we know where we need to go, and we know that we need to get there faster. We need to transform the entire human society into something that is both ecologically, economically, and socially sustainable, because it's not right now. I'm well aware that many of the things that we need to do to get there may be high tech, but they're not necessarily very digital. For instance, an industrial nation such as Sweden should not only become fossil free, but we should probably adapt at large scale technology that will help us to clean the atmosphere and capture carbon dioxide. But having said that, it's still a bit frustrating to me that sometimes when we talk about ecological sustainability or sustainability at large, we don't really discuss it in the terms of how much the bits can matter, how much the data matters to actually get there. And I mean, I've been frustrated about that for quite some time because, to be honest, underestimating the power of the internet is not a very new thing. Smart people have done so before. Paul Krugman, world-renowned national economist, said this in the year 2000. The growth of the internet will slow drastically when it becomes apparent that most people have nothing to say to each other. By 2005 or so, it will become clear that the internet's impact on the economy has been no greater than the fax machines. Ouch. Also, 8 years after saying this, he was rewarded with the Nobel Prize in Economy from Sweden. Apparently not for having said this specific thing. So I'm sort of used to being frustrated about this, but what I really hope that we all agree on now is that it's rather like this. Digital is not an industry. Digital is a new dimension that humanity, we have created it for ourselves. I mean, we've always had to take into account room, space, and time in everything we had to do. And now we can take into account space, time, and digital in anything we do. Because regardless if we talk about the clothes that we're wearing, the roads, the streets that we're walking, the houses, the walls, anything that we produce, how we distribute it, how we consume it, it has a digital dimension that adds value and that has an impact on our appreciation and how we use it. It actually, the digital dimension even changes abstract things such as a concept of integrity. What is integrity? It's a concept that we develop in a cultural context. So what does that mean in a world with a digital dimension? What do we trust in a world with a digital dimension? We're used to trusting industrialized process and things being implemented by people. And then we realize that they were biased, and now we can use algorithms and we start trusting them, and we realize that they have a different kind of bias. But regardless, I think it's very interesting to think that we should and could use this dimension to increase the value of every atom on the planet and to maximize economic growth and use of what we can create endless amounts of, meaning bits. And I want to tell you a couple of examples of what we know that this can mean. Starting with the global goal of achieving health. Now one might think that health is not a super important global goal for, welfare nations such as Sweden, but that's not true, because the way we've handled things have given us the opportunity to live longer lives. But when we live longer lives, we tend to live for a long time with a lot of diseases. And that kind of becomes very complex and very expensive. So all welfare nations in the world have the similar challenge, that the cost of keeping us fit so that we can have some sort of life quality is increasing as the demography gets older and older. And that's one area where we also know that digital matters a lot, because it gives us the tools to get away from this problem that if we keep doing things the way we are now, it doesn't work anymore, it doesn't scale, we can't have this welfare working this way. But if we look at the innovations being done right now, we understand that we can handle it differently. We look at innovations such as this. This is an instrument that would allow me as a mother of 3 to check if my kid has an ear infection from home. I would not need to take my child to the waiting room, hang out there for 8 hours with people who have all kinds of different diseases, just to find out once again that it was not an ear infection. But I could rather just figure that out at home, saving money, time, making my life more convenient. We see a lot of innovations handling data to make diagnosis earlier. Neurotrack is one company that use digitalized services for cognitive tests that can diagnose Alzheimer's up to 6 years before the real symptoms really occur. Now that would save a lot of human suffering. That would mean a lot for the increasing number of people who will have to suffer through actually having Alzheimer's in their lifetime. We also see a movement of people taking things into their own hands, working alongside researchers, but really not waiting. There's a hashtag called "We Are Not Waiting," where people with diabetes have organized themselves to share research information, to share data about themselves, but more importantly, they have chosen to hack their glucose meters and their insulin pumps so that they, before the market would offer that to them, could have mobile services to check if your diabetic kid is having a problem at school or when they're sleeping, so that they could fine-tune their own treatment. Because after all, they would only meet their doctor every 6 months or so, but keeping track of all this by themselves has really enabled them. And they've done so by hacking things, sharing code on GitHub, making it all open, and getting way ahead of where the market was just a few years ago. We see other really interesting innovations such as Proteus. Back in 2012, they got FDA approval for technology that created swallowable sensors. Sensors that when you have them in your stomach, they would use battery acids to close the battery circuit, giving it enough energy to ping a plaster that you have on your arm that in itself would talk to your mobile and then up to the cloud, sending immediate information about what kind of medication you had and some other biostats. Now, what would that really mean? We know that it's really incredibly expensive to do the clinical studies, that once you have a functional molecule, you need to figure out how to treat people with it. And since we're all so different and it's difficult to know if people even took their medication, it's been insanely expensive. This kind of technology being rolled out this year, in effect, in actual medication, can mean a big difference. So everywhere we see these innovations, we also see platforms coming up, because companies have realized that platforms in this world meant a 30% cut of all the massive innovation that was created on the mobile phones. Naturally, platform position in a lot of areas will be very valuable, where data can be collected at huge scale and then used for all kinds of purposes, both for US researchers and for innovative companies and for individuals. I talked to one researcher who said, well, let's just, acknowledge the idea that we may just be a decade or so away from a life where it's completely natural that when you brush your teeth in the morning, there's an automatic saliva test being done, where that information will be sent to the cloud, cross-referenced with DNA, automatically fine-tuning your dietary advice and your exercise pattern and whatever medications you might need right now. I can imagine some people are thinking, can she spell to integrity? Has she even heard of the concept? I can, I think. But I just want to say that many of these things are such opportunities to us. We know that we really need it, but naturally we also have to find the solutions that will make us in control of me as a patient, have some control of my data, who can use it when and for what purpose. But looking into the more ecological, the goals related to ecological sustainability, we also see that digital is important there. We understand that we need cities, we need to transform energy, we need to transform transport systems for us to be able to have a sustainable world. And that's why Sweden, for instance, has said that we're going to be one of the first fossil-free nations in the world on the year 2050. Now, that's not really enough. We should be there in 2035 if we really, really want to take some serious responsibility. And we know that we have a lot of the technological solutions needed. For instance, the cost of solar and the effect of them is dropping still at a very rapid pace. And we need, at large scale, loads of small-scale solar energy producers. But if that's going to work, again, we need digital services because we need these prosumers to be able to trade with each other. Now, these services already exist, maybe not in Sweden at the moment, but we know we need them and they are there. We also know that we need loads of batteries for this to work. They also exist, but we need batteries that, just as the home appliances in our houses, are way smarter than the pretty stupid grid still will be. Things that are smart enough to take into account the actual need of the grid and adjust their behavior accordingly. And this is interesting because that's where the transformation of the energy system kind of is related to the transformation of the transport system. Because what is an electric car if not a battery? So big amounts of electric vehicles will actually be paramount in that transition, making the grid be able to handle large, massive amounts of small-scale energy production. And they also happen to have another interesting feature, namely they're becoming autonomous. So what we understand now is that the transportation system of tomorrow, but it is the transportation system that we need to decide upon today, that we need to invest in today, that we need to actually push out to market today, has these three things in them. It's automized, it's service-based, and it's fossil-free. It's a transportation system where we no longer own cars, where we actually just pay for getting from A to B in a system where different ways of transportations work together to give me or you the best convenience at this moment. There is a big difference traveling from central Stockholm to here in the morning or putting my 3 kids into something to get to the slopes because we're going skiing. I need completely different ways of transportation for that, and this will give us better convenience. It will also mean that we are actually saving a lot of resources, because right now we're not even used to seeing it, but we are wasting so much. An average European car is only used 5% of the time. 50% of an average European city area is used to facilitate roads and parking lots when we need it for completely different things. People, anyone. And this happens in every ecosystem, that we have huge amount of waste, also of raw material that we really can't afford. So we know that we need to change the entire systems so that we can have both production and consumption work in a way more sustainable way. I would like to mention then, because I think it's a very valuable tool for thinking, the Resolve framework that was introduced to me in a report that I found last year called Growth Within, a circular economy vision for a competitive Europe, really putting into numbers not only how much fossil fuels, how much better the climate will be, but also how much better business Europe can make by addressing this as an opportunity rather than a challenge, because we really are dependent on so much import of resources, and if we can use these solutions, we will get way better. So digital is needed in basically all of this, in regenerating, in sharing services, in optimizing systems, in closing loops, in virtualizing anything that can be virtualized. Going back to transportation again, we just need to understand we don't need more roads and we don't need more cars. We need more intelligent transport systems, and they are all based on data. Another challenge is to change behavior. And I think it's a different thing. Sometimes we can change behavior simply by offering services that are zero friction, that are better, that are more convenient. And that's what I think will happen with transportation. I don't worry about that. As consumers, we will adapt if we get the opportunity of having these solutions available to us. However, changing behavior related to other important things such as food habits is a trickier question. It's not that, obvious that it will be more convenient to stop eating so much meat. Here, I also think that digital services can make a big difference. Look at this startup in the US. They're called Good Guide. They're helping consumers make climate-informed decisions when standing in the store. But the problem is, as long as it requires you to open an app, it's only going to work for the most motivated people who, sort of don't need it anyhow. How could we make this kind of information available all the time? It should be on the price tag. Looking into initiatives that could hold such a promise, I see some things happening in supply chain innovation, trying to figure out using the data. I see GS1, the member organization that handles the barcode on everything, doing something interesting here when they're saying that they want to show data for the carbon footprint measurement of transport and warehousing in retail. Now that's a really interesting way of handling things, even though I could imagine that such an organization will get swamped into discussions on what is accurate enough data. And as soon as we're close to something that will show us differences between different brands, and me as a consumer is supposed to see that, it gets sort of tricky. What could we do to make it less dramatic? What could it mean something is if I, for instance, I don't really need to see the difference between two brands of shampoo bottles. What if I could just see the actual impact of one more shampoo bottle, or the actual impact of that steak, regardless of who produced it? Perhaps that could bring us further. I think it could bring us to the point where we would at least be ready to accept addressing that it has a cost, an environmental cost. So regardless of what we're talking about, we need data. We need data to understand the complex systems that we created, to see where we should put our effort. We need the data to optimize every system so that it's not so wasteful as it is today. We need it to give us as consumers the services we need to have a different behavior. We need it to virtualize anything that can be virtualized. How can it be that a digital book has a higher tax than a printed one? It doesn't make any sense. So I'm very happy to see that the Global Goals has this meaning, and it's very icon for it, saying that in this world with a digital dimension, data and structured open data is infrastructure. Because if data itself is the raw material we need for all the innovation, then making it accessible through interoperability and standards is the infrastructure we need, because we need the information at the large scale to create markets. We cannot keep locking it into proprietary systems all the time if we want to get anywhere. And I think the first time I sort of really realized that was looking at a neat research project from MIT back in 2009. It was called Trash Tracker. They took GPS trackers and smacked it on all kinds of electronic trash and threw it away. And with that, just in a couple of hours and days, they could actually see the very complex system of how trash is handled in the US unfold before their eyes. And they could see what sort of trash would actually travel across the continent, worst cases not only once. And that meant that they could see where things would need to be adjusted. Now imagine trying to set up that analysis pre-GPS trackers. Imagine going to all those places, digging through their paperworks, trying to see what kind of truck company was supposed to drive where, and then doing that impossible task, and then knowing that whatever your result was, you still would not really know if it corresponded at all to reality compared to this. So the thing is that just getting access to all of this makes it possible for us to see what we could not see before, to see what our society, which is in all itself a very complex structure, how it works, where to put our efforts. And I think this is key to making reforms also that actually have an impact in the world. And I think that the decision makers that we have today actually understand that, because this is not only for transportation or garbage collection. The EU Commissioner for Research, Science and Innovation just recently said that he believes that every science article from the Europe should be open access. Perhaps he read the University of Chicago study that showed there was a pretty strong correlation between open access publishing being seen on Wikipedia and actually reaching a larger audience with one's research. I hope you all are well aware of that. But he also said, we must create infrastructure. Europe's final transition must be one from fragmented data sets to an integrated European open science cloud. What would it mean to you as a researcher if you knew that you could access data from other types of research in a very simple way, if that was interoperable? What would it mean for your ability to do your own experiments and push things further? What will it mean for humanity that we have this communication revolution that the digital dimension is? I mean, when we learned how to speak, we know that way we learned to store information in each other's head. It helped us start solving more complex problems than other species could. When we learned how to write, we understand now that was the basis of logical reasoning. That was how we started thinking in abstract terms. That had a huge impact on what kind of problems we could solve. What did it mean when we learned to print information and spread it over time and space? We could have public schools. What does it mean that we have the internet? If we make all of this available, we are available to each other, and the knowledge that you are all pushing further becomes so much more available in a distributed network of human knowledge. This is one of the reasons why one of my personal favorite goals of the global goals has to do with education, has to do with making knowledge even more accessible to everyone whenever we need it. And talking about that, I think I'm coming from the perspective of realizing that growing up and living in Sweden with a population of 9.6 million, we are just a mid-sized city from a global perspective. We're a mid-sized city trying to add value, also sometimes claiming we should be the best at everything. Let's not talk too much about that. At the same time, you're seeing technology moving at a pace where even fairly sane people start thinking, I don't know about this. Are there going to be any jobs? Can we create any value once we get out of here? And I find it more inspiring to look at what actually happens when you put so much knowledge in the hands of just teenagers. Just Google teenage innovator and see all the fantastic, brilliant people there. Those are the ones that I hope that we get inspired by and slightly scared. What's interesting with that is that regardless of what we are doing, we understand that it's the pace of change that is our real challenge. There's an interesting book called The Future of Professions that just lists the knowledge workers, the lawyers, the doctors, the economists, and what it means with its technology evolution, with AI, with robotics, with access to other people's knowledge, and how much that requires us to change how we work, to adapt, to use new tools, to share knowledge in a different way, to learn a new thing and adapt it into our way of work next week. In fact, the CEO of AT&T, he has said, put it like this: anyone who does not put at least 5 hours per week into learning new stuff is smoked. Interesting then that our entire system is rather designed for you studying for the first 25, 26 years and then going off to work, and after that surviving on 5 to 6, educational or conference days a year. And apart from that, maybe sometimes you need to reconsider your career and then take like a 6 months to a year sabbatical and learn something new. That does not scale at all. It's insane. But at the same time, we're seeing a global market of really valuable stuff out there, accessible for anyone who cares to take notice. And for an audience such as this, I would like to say, wouldn't it be fantastic to see Swedish university take a huge step here and get up front rather than being laggards? Because I think that the global market of packaged higher education that is available in our everyday lives, that we can learn and study every week, that has a tremendous disruptive potential, not to kill universities, but to change our lifestyle, to make it into something where it's completely natural for most people to take a higher education course every quarter, at least. What would that mean? So to summarize things, I also think that we can do a lot to increase the speed in which all of this is happening. So I wanted to try out the idea of formulating 3 human rights that could increase that acceleration that at least I would like to have. I would like to have the right to receive proactive, personalized health services and treatment based on my individual profile. I don't really want other people to meddle too much about that. I think I have the right to expect it because I know it's important, both for my health today and for the future. I would like the right to make climate-informed consumer decisions every day, everywhere. I don't really need exact data from one brand or another, but I really need to understand better what it means when I buy the steak tomorrow night as well, compared to buying some vegetarian alternative. That would have an impact on me. And I understand that I need to get to a point where I'm ready to accept paying the real price, including environmental effects. And I think this would help me a lot. And I also want the right to get trustworthy knowledge and skill examination regardless of where I learned something, regardless or if I studied here at KTH, or if I studied in Mogadishu, or if I studied at Coursera, or if I studied at the University of YouTube, because that also happens. That really shouldn't matter. What would it mean to integration if we would simply validate knowledge regardless of where it came from? I hope that you have even more ideas. We know that we need to work inclusive. We know that we need to find the win-win solutions that makes everybody able to participate. We know that we need to work in iterations to try things small scale and scale it up to big scale. And I hope that we will all do it thinking that we want to increase the value of every single atom while maximizing growth with the help of bits. And I'm super happy if I can be a tiny part of it, because you're all doing it every day. Thank you.
So please, Darja, stay on stage. I mean, fantastic talk. And I think what is really fantastic with your talk is that what you say is often in this area when we talk about sustainability, we get into talking about doomsday and it's really dark. And what you're saying is that by using utilization and getting an informative global citizen, we will solve this. And I think that is extremely a positive message you give, which is really important.
It's true, and I just want to say one thing. What we do know is that if we don't address this, we're looking at huge value loss and human suffering. Yeah. But again, this growth within report, it really put into numbers how much business opportunity there is.
Yeah. So, questions. We have time for some questions. Yep, there we have the first question. And here we have a mic. We will record the presentations and they will be available on the web.
Yeah, thanks for a very good speech. My name is Per-Ola Andersson. I was just mystified in the beginning because I think everything makes sense in terms of openness and sharing all the information and competence and knowledge. You had almost at the last bullet the legal ramifications for having countries not limiting the sharing of knowledge. Just so everyone knows, when the Panama letters were disclosed, China closed down internet immediately because most of their politicians put all the money in Panama. So I would like you to move that one a little bit higher up in your priority.
Thank you.
That legal bullet, I think it was 15 or 16.
Yeah.
Any comment?
If I understand you correctly, just emphasize even more how important it is that we have access to data. Yes. Yeah. I believe so. And in trying, I don't really work with media companies, but when I am asked to have an opinion, I'm saying I think that the best thing we can do in helping media companies is to make sure that it's that we need open data on transactions, on who made what decision when we talk about the ones that we elected. Because that would make the scrutiny of decision makers way cheaper and increase transparency. So there are so many angles to come at this, and I completely agree.
Yep, we have a second question here. And Jerker is running very fast here. He's a fast runner.
Yep. Det är en sak med information och det är att kunna veta om den är sant eller är faktuellt. Det som jag har sett hur mycket jobb det är till exempel Wikipedia att se till att det är en kvalitet i information, och vi vet hur till exempel Ryssland vill sprida osanningar. Och då är detta en kanske lika komplicerad funktionalitet att se till att information är riktig.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, we could have one more hour only talking about open data infrastructure and what does it mean. And if we dig into different areas, then I think for me it's difficult to talk about that in a very broad general perspective. But if I should make one broad general remark, it's that when we handle information as infrastructure, looking at, for instance, health data or something else, it's important that we use standards not only to achieve interoperability, but it also has to do with understanding the quality. And those processes, at least for a lot of data that has a huge societal impact, the actual standardization process must be way more transparent also. So if we look at different areas, transport or health or whatever, we can then, who will have the responsibility of working with this can be different, public versus corporate initiatives, etc. Depends on the area. But I think, yes, my answer would be, in general, we also very much need to address the processes related to how we review where the data comes from, its quality, how it's standardized, and how it's made accessible. And I hope that sort of at least addresses your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Darja. An excellent talk.